Hi, my name is Michael Chikeen. The smartest people I've met have one common belief, that us silly humans really don't know much. For example, we still don't know why planes stay in the air, or how Tylenol or even gravity works. Yeah, gravity. Look it up. In today's distracted, clickbait, misinformation age, I wish we could all be less certain, more humble, and a lot more curious. Admittedly, I've been known to struggle with all three. So no more, no less, this show is my attempt to be that change. Thanks for joining me, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome back to No More, No Less. I'm still your host, Mike Chikeen, and here in the virtual studio, I have with me Shawn Wickens. Shawn is a New York-based futurist, casual stoner, and comedian. He co-produced Stone Laughs, a monthly 420-friendly comedy show in Midtown Manhattan. His most audacious work yet, the first edition of the Time Machine Blueprints, is available on Amazon.com. Or you can simply visit timemachineblueprints.com. So without further ado, here's Shawn and I just rambling about time travel for as long as we can. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the show, Shawn.
Sure, that's very appropriate. It is just rambling. I'm not a physicist. I'm a stoner comedian, but here we are.
I like that one of the titles is Stoner, comedian.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit how you stumbled onto time travel as a hobby to research and be more interested in.
Sure. Well, I think it started from really just sometimes sitting at home and getting stoned, and sometimes I'll watch people on YouTube or Twitch just play video games. That's my the content I consume when I'm stoned.
Right.
But then sometimes it's nature documentaries, and then sometimes it's physics things on YouTube. So I would say that even before I became a pseudo expert, I've always been kind of interested in that kind of stuff. But I think post-pandemic, when we all lost a little bit of time, I was just thinking about time a little bit and how to sort of recapture it and, maybe relive some missed time. And honestly, one night I was just stoned in my apartment on a weed brownie that I made myself. And I wondered if anybody owned the domain name Time Machine Blueprints. That was it. And I went and checked, and it was available. And I was like, my God, how come nobody has this? It seems like it's an important thing to, So I bought it, and I really didn't even, the first joy was looking it up and seeing it was available. The second joy was waking up the next morning kind of forgetting that I had done it, and then saw in my inbox that I had registered this domain name. And so that's kind of the start. And then I really do tell people that this book is kind of a manifestation machine, because once you sort of grab onto something like timemachineblueprints.com, you kind of just start thinking about more stuff. So that's where it began.
Right. Well, before I went into the concept of the book itself.
Yes.
What was secretly the idea is if I buy timemachineblueprints.com, that it's possible that someone from the future would want to come to your house and ask to buy it from you right away. It'd be like, listen, I need this.
Right.
I need this domain. People need
Sure.
to know.
I mean, that's definitely one of the kind of weird thoughts that you think of. One of my recent things is kind of very similar to that, is that I came up with an idea for a crime where, and there's some hypothetical gymnastics that are involved in it. But if a time machine were real, what anybody could do is go to the future, just take $1 million at a point in the future when $1 million isn't worth that much.
Yeah.
And bring it back now. And then it's, they probably wouldn't even miss it in the future, right? So that's like the illegal way to do it. But
wait, hold on. But
yes.
Before we move on,
sure.
How would you do that? Because you'd have to
Sure.
go so far in the future, or
Right.
a time that inflation's so out of control that you can go to Times Square and busk for $1 million for a couple
Right.
days,
Sure.
and then come back. Or do you have any other ideas for how
Well,
you do it?
yeah. So
Bake sale?
well, that was the first draft. Is if you have a time machine, go to the future, and then get it. But the second draft of the idea is more brilliant, and it's just that you put the intention out to the future, that somebody from the future gives you something or anything of value in the present,
Right.
and then so I mean, then it's a win-win. Nobody really loses. There's no thievery involved. Even it's just sort of like accepting goodness from the future.
Right.
So that's a recent idea. You know what I mean? Um, but I did sit on the domain name for a while, and I didn't really know what to do with it. And but it did force me to think about time travel a little bit, because why not? And we can get to more of those specific thoughts, definitely. But when I realized I could put out a book, I just decided that it could be a blank book, because it is the first edition. So I'm fucking with people a little bit, but there is actual some time travel stuff in the back. So I do tell people that, now this is out there, some kid who's more brilliant than I might get motivated to finish it, or I'll keep on working on it. I'm already working on a second edition that has less blank pages, more information in the back. So it's out there, you know what I mean? We're one day closer.
Right. And why are you always thinking the future? Because I got to say, the one thing Back to the Future gave us in number two, among the many things Back to the Future has given us,
right.
But I think like that sports almanac idea is just so good, and you wouldn't need to go that far into the future to make an absolute killing. But
sure.
Because otherwise, right now, I'd say the quickest way to go back and forth in not too long a time is probably Bitcoin. Like if you go show up to like 2011 with $1,000, and you go on the dark web and you can buy 10,000 Bitcoin, you store it on the blockchain, you go forward 10 years, and you're like, okay, where's my island?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, this really comes down to the belief that you have to think that good things are possible for tomorrow. And the more that you have something to look forward to. But I do tell people, look, I'm not a crazy person by dipping my consciousness into time travel. You know what I mean? And I have also made the promise to not let this make me crazy. Because let's be honest, any idea that you obsess over a little too much has the possibility of driving you a little nuts. Yeah. But the premise really is just like, let's think forward, look forward to tomorrow rather than being afraid of it.
Right. I like that.
Yeah.
And how far have you gotten with the physics? Because I've heard, the whole Einstein-Rosen bridge and all the theory behind that, and that perhaps if we were able to sail a ship through the middle of a black hole, maybe it would come out somewhere else, because we don't know where black holes go. Like, I've heard a couple things like that, but maybe take me through some of the things your pot infused research has taken you.
Yeah. That's the first time anyone's referred to it as research, so I appreciate that. Thank you. I do feel even slightly more credentialized than I did, 20 minutes ago. So one of the first things that I thought of, because I was like, all right, I own timemachineblueprints.com. Now I got to think about some stuff. And, so much of our knowledge, quote unquote, knowledge of time travel comes from pop culture stuff, which only means that we, it gives us a chance to dream, but I think it gives us opportunities to dream inaccurately, Mm-hmm. So, all right, people are always like, oh, you can't time travel because you'll create paradoxes. So one of my first stone thoughts about time travel was, maybe what we need to do is, instead of learning how to travel through time in our own reality, we need to learn how to travel to a different reality And from that reality, it might not create a paradox to travel to a different time in our own reality.
Interesting. Oh, I love this already. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
and now, okay,
yeah.
now that might be fake, but it's also, well, now we're thinking things about things in a different way, right?
Right.
But go ahead.
Yeah. So you're saying, if it's to see if I understand correctly, you're saying if I jump to another Earth and part of the multiverse, and then I
Mm-hmm.
jump back, but when I
Right.
come back, I arrive in 1955 in this time,
Possibly.
it
Right.
might not cause any paradoxes.
It might
That
not.
I even thought of, like, because you have all like these the branch timelines again after Back to the Future number 2 and 3,
Right.
and you have the end game Avengers sort of idea that, okay, if you go and create different branches, then you have to go and fix it the exact
Sure.
same way
Sure.
from what you did, all of those things. And so I was thinking, yeah, I wonder if, like, if you were to, this is more like time copish, that
Mm-hmm.
if you were to go back in time to a
Yes.
time in which you exist, that I wonder if maybe one of you just gets overwritten, that as soon as you're in that time, either
Mm-hmm.
you, the person who's arrived from the future, ceases to exist, or
Sure.
that other person ceases to exist, or if you touch, then there's the paradox. So maybe people have figured out in the future how to come back in time, but as
Right.
soon as they arrive, they're obliterated.
Sure. Another way to think of it is that, what if it's possible we've had people go into the past and fuck things up, but we've then had people who was, speaking of time cops, we've had people who are farther ahead in the future who just came back and fixed it. You know what I mean? So it's,
Right.
um, when I first started on this weird journey, I actually did have friends warn me by saying, like, "Hey man, you don't know what you're fucking with." And it's like,
What?
I'm really not fucking with anything. I'm just sort of like thinking, you know what I mean? I'm not like
How stone was that friend
yeah,
in that
right.
advice?
Um but I don't know, conspiracy theories have caused us to be paranoid about so many different things, you know what I mean?
Right.
Um so but I thought about that too, because people were like, "Man, you don't know what you're dealing with here." And you know, we've never. So I'm also not a physicist, but I know that by studying light, we haven't like fractured the speed of light, or you know what I mean, or like we haven't
Right.
ruined gravity, and like gravity is still a constant, and light is still a constant, and I think it's um, a little egotistical of us to think that we'll somehow break time by messing with time, because
Right.
uh, I mean, we might hurt ourselves, yes, but I don't think we're going to destroy reality with the CERN reactor or anything. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I think, putting a little bit too much power on us. Here's another thought that I had that, I don't know, kind of blew my mind, and it's that because people always talk about how space is in 3 dimensions, and hypothetically time is the 4th dimension, and I once thought that if a 4th dimensional being was able to look at Earth, which is a 3 dimensional object, they might be able to perceive all sides of it at the same time,
Mm.
which would, in effect, make flat earthers right, just in a wrong way, where you are able to see all of the Earth at once.
If there's
Um,
one thing I hope this episode
yeah.
doesn't do, is it gives flat earthers any sort of confidence in it. I just want to put that out there.
Sure.
And your friend that's giving you advice, that dude, you don't know what you're fucking with. Like,
Yeah.
what does he think you're doing? Like, do you have a plutonium based device in your garage right now? I mean, like, what is he scared of you doing?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. But I think in some ways it does show that, um, I don't know, thoughts are scary. And we've all like hurt ourselves by thinking about something that, you know what I mean? We've all hurt ourselves with thoughts.
Right.
And so I mean, that's something to think about. I also think that um, to be optimistic in a world where you have so many reasons to not be optimistic,
Sure.
some people do treat that as suspicion in some ways. And I think to go in front of people and to kind of preach, like, hey, like, let's not fear tomorrow. It sometimes seems abnormal because we're so used to hear, like, we have so much to be afraid of.
Right. Yeah, I think that echoes to a lot of things right now. That sometimes you try to tell people that things are okay, or that are going to be okay, and you get a lot of pushback. But I kind of think we can hold two truths in our mind at the same time. Like we can say that, like, yeah, things are kind of fucked up. Like the planet is kind of messed up in the way things are going, and
Right.
how ostrich like a lot of humans are. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure myself included for a bunch of issues.
Sure.
It doesn't mean we can't still strive for goodness. Or I had this conversation with someone recently where she was like really negative on people. Like people are the worst. She don't want to be around people. Like people are awful. Like really that was her worldview. And I was like, yeah, like I'm sure you have plenty of points to say that's the case, and like I'm not saying that you're wrong. That on
Sure.
average, maybe most people are selfish, lying monsters, but like I'm not going to choose to walk through the world like
Right.
that.
Right.
Like I know people in my life that are great, and so there's other people out there that'll also be great. So I'm going to choose to, like I said, to be optimistic and that the future is going to be okay, and that I'm going to find more great people, and I'm not going to just think everyone's a Ted Bundy walking around trying to charm me.
Right. Right.
And I like your idea of looking towards the future. And has that been where most of your thought has been as far as time traveling, or has there been any like thought experiments about going to the past?
Um, it's I think I trust me. There's times that I do get a little like freaked out by things that I think about, or you know what I mean, or
Right.
it's even just to think about. It's easy to think about how well, because I've handed this book to people and who don't know me, like after comedy shows, and to see them open it and kind of sometimes get a little freaked out. Sometimes people laugh, but sometimes people get a little sort of like in their head about it.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to go around your whole life freaking everyone out. So that's like not a good thing to aspire to. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, as for traveling to the past, I okay, because we do have physics to think about, and if we go to the past and change things, what will that mean for the present and the future? So maybe we can't do that, but maybe we can. Um, there's two versions of time travel that I think might become possible. Um, and one is, because there's so many experiments nowadays with like virtual reality, and I read people talking about how one day you'll be able to upload your consciousness to the cloud and that kind of thing.
Right.
Um, I think if we're able to do that, I think we'll be able to really plug ourselves into some sort of machine and revisit our own past. And I think the benefit of being able to do that is we might be able to confront traumatic memories and kind of somehow create new memories about traumatic events.
Right.
Not to erase them, but just sort of like, well, now we've created a different perception or reality of our past,
Sure. Well,
Um,
in a way, they're kind of doing that with like the assisted MDMA
right.
therapy, where you can kind of recode how you see different things
Mm-hmm.
in the past. And
Yeah.
I thought a lot about well, maybe not a lot, but I thought about with all the shows out there about like uploading consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they can do that tomorrow, it doesn't really give me much peace, because even if you upload my consciousness, I'm still going to be conscious in this body, and this meat sack
Sure.
is still got to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so like, yes, I am going to, a version of me is still going to continue to live in the cloud and be super happy he can live forever and just go play pinball for a couple years if he wants to.
Right.
But this meat sack is going to be like, I wonder what it's like over there.
No, true. But I also think that is, you know, technological advancements are so difficult because, you know, when you talk about like native technology users, their brains are just wired very differently. So it's like that kind of thought is difficult for us because it feels new and foreign. But people who are born in that may not have a problem with the fact that, like, well, I don't get to experience that, but another part of me does. They might, you know, I also think that sometimes we do get used to so much bad stuff that we're afraid of anything good happening. So we try to, you know, talk ourselves out of being amazed by the things that will happen in our lifetime.
Right. Huh. Yeah, it's funny the different avenues I can see that you've went down thinking about the concept of having a time machine. I
Right.
mean, even like if your book, you know, is obviously has a lot of humor into it, like you could even have pages on meditate, so you're not traveling too far in the future.
Sure.
Listen to the song that you had that reminds you of a first love. Like all these things of how we do time travel in our lives, and it's
Right.
really the only thing that we have available to us now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can't even you know, have a viewer and then go into the past and see things. And it's funny, I was on a road trip once, and I have one buddy who I've been on a couple trips with who never ceases to amaze me with some random question he comes up with
Mm-hmm.
that will take us 3 hours to excavate.
Oh yeah.
And one time we were going up to a cottage and he's like, so, and I'm like, yes, here it comes. Joe's got something good for me today. He
Right.
goes, so if you could go back in time
Mm.
and relive one moment in your life and even
Mm.
just watch it or participate and do it again, what would it be? And I was like, fuck, yes, that's a great question. And so
Right.
like because there's a couple, there's some that you would love to, like maybe a certain victory or someone you loved or all these things that you would just want to like watch it again and just see
Mm-hmm.
what you were like. And there's other ones where you just either want to be in it to feel it and feel how fun something was or whatever, or to I think he's no I don't think the question was, I don't think you could change it, so you could either just watch it or like be in the body, experience it. And I
Oh
love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've thought about that kind of stuff, and I really think that if we were able to, you know, actually this idea came from Mandela effects a little bit. Just
Okay.
thinking about um, these shared misrememberings, you know.
Right.
Um, so we have a lot of, you know, evidence of these macrocosm examples of Mandela effects, but we don't really have personal, like private examples of Mandela effects. Because if you were able to go
Hmm.
back in time, your life would probably feel so much different than you remember it. Because one of the brilliant things I heard somebody say to me once is that we only really remember the last time we remember something. We're always remembering a memory. You can
Right.
only remember an event once. Once you remember it again, you're remembering the memory of it. And our memory is so bad, and we end up really do, I think, remembering things in a way that sort of supports our worldview about things. So if you
Right.
went back to the past, it would probably seem like an endless series of Mandela effects where it's like, that's not really how I remember it. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh,
Um,
that's great. Yeah, because an article I read in I don't know if this magazine exists anymore. It was called Scientific American Mind. It was just
okay.
about the brain, and it was just like a little offshoot from Scientific American.
Yeah.
And they said they used to think about memory that when you access a memory, um, it like let's say the memory was in cement, and then when you access it, it's pliable and you can watch it, and then it goes back to being cement. But they
Hmm.
said that's not really the case. They're like it's in cement, and then when you activate it or reanimate this memory again, it becomes
Hmm.
pliable. But then if you change, to your point, 1% of that memory, it goes in back into the cement changed. And
Right.
then when you reanimate that memory again, it's not the original memory. It's a different memory. So if you do that 1% 10 different times, then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like, let's
It's
say,
it's exponential change. It's
right.
probably, you know,
So let's
yeah.
say you're remembering someone, and all of a sudden, like, there's this concept in relationship science of the negative cycle. That if you're
Hmm.
had too many negative experience with a partner, then you're in a negative cycle, and you start remembering the story of that relationship and that person differently. So I don't know how, if you've changed the memory of your story of meeting your partner 40 times and now they're just a monster. Then
Right.
I don't know how you get back to being like this lovely person that you fell in love with. So yeah, it'd be Mandela effects right to the divorce lawyer.
Yeah, yeah. Whenever I see people on the internet talking about not only Mandela effects, but you know, is life a simulation and is the multiverse real? It really makes me think that um, you know, since perception is reality, and there's close to 8 billion people on this earth,
Hmm.
like that's 8 billion different perceptions. That's 8 billion different. Like the multiverse is surrounding us at all times because everybody sees everything
Right.
from such a different perspective. Um, so it doesn't matter if life is a simulation. It's, you know what I mean? We're all sort of simulating what we think is going on. So
Right.
the challenge is to like, whether life's, whether we live in a computer or not, the challenge is like, how do we, you know, make it a win for everybody?
Sure.
Which is impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the concept for, like, if you get away from the God nonsense, I call it, then I like having the idea of, well, what could we be? Because I've even seen conversations on the internet. Well, atheists, then, well, if there's no God, well, then what else could it be? We're like, well, that's the point. Who the fuck knows?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, I've
Yeah.
heard people say that, like, because the universe is expanding, like, perhaps our universe right now is just the inside of the cells of a baby, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
expanding because it's growing. And
Right.
humans are perhaps tiny cells that are, abnormal. And if we happen to spread to other planets, which maybe are different cells, maybe we are a virus.
Yeah. Sure.
Right. So, maybe the Elon will get us to other planets just to make us pollute those planets just as badly as we've created on this one. So, like, along with time travel, it really takes you all over the place for this theoretical thinking that I love.
Yeah. I've even, you know, in trying to think so positively and optimistically, I've even sometimes wondered if our whole concept of death is just completely wrong. And, you know, the spirit leaving the body is just maybe that's the next evolutionary step.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you see so many things about near death experiences and how joyful it is. You know, it's possible that that is something that within our view of time only lasts like 2 or 3 seconds,
Right.
but 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 when you're on the other side of it, it feels like an eternity of joy, and then maybe it's over, and then that's it. But I mean, that's not anything to not look forward to. You know, like
Yeah, that's a
um,
that's a really high-minded way to look at it. And,
sure, and it's
and
scary, and it's also scary to think of death as something to not fear at all. Like
yeah,
that's
I had a couple years where the concept of death was really, like, gripping me.
oh yeah,
Um, that, like, oh, I guess it's just like sleeping, except you don't wake up.
sure.
That's awful.
Yeah,
But
I
because
remember being like 7 and learning about the concept of eternity and heaven, and that seemed absolutely scary.
right.
Live, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, that was I think that was my first step, and this wasn't until my mid to late 20s where I
yeah,
started questioning all the Catholicism I had been brought up with.
uh
That,
huh,
like, hold on, so if I'm good all my life,
right,
but I don't believe in this God that they tell me to, then I'm going to hell. Okay, that seems weird. But
mm-hmm,
if I'm also good all my life and then I go to heaven, I'm also surrounded with all the monsters down here that just confessed before they died.
Right.
Well, that's not heaven for me. Like that, I'm still with all these fucking heathens or whatever you want to call it. And that kind of broke my brain as far as I broke my Catholic brain at that time. And it was
Yeah.
only maybe a few years afterwards that I realized, okay, I'm just atheist, because I also don't think that it's impossible that there is a God, right? Like if I died and I show up at these pearly gates, I would just be like, well, no fucking way.
Oh, sure.
but I think it's a crazy way to live your life.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but if it happened in the end, well, maybe I just didn't see it coming.
Yeah. I have a joke that I tell once in a while on stage where, what if when we die, we see some light, some tunnel, and then we go through it and we actually do see like gates in a cloud, and it's like, holy crap, it's, you know, our concept of heaven was right, you know, and we
Right.
get closer to the gates and they open up, and then we just hear that Rick Astley song. What if life was just one big Rickroll, and then that's it, you know?
That would be true. You know what? If Rick Astley was in some part our higher being, I would be
Right.
totally cool with that.
Yeah.
I mean, what a guy.
I mean, if it's something we don't know or can't anticipate, it might be that. We don't
Yeah.
know.
Have you thought, going back to Time Machine themselves?
Hmm.
Have you thought of what would be, because the DeLorean's the coolest, but practically I think it's a disaster. You would get maybe one lucky trip where you don't get killed the second you
sure.
enter the other time,
Yeah.
or kill somebody else. Like you just show up and you're just in the middle of a preschool. Okay, I've just destroyed 30 kids and hit a wall.
Right. I think that the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure phone booth,
Yeah.
which is kind of a ripoff of the Doctor Who thing. I
Yeah.
think that's it's a pretty cool concept. It just, it looks cool. If you have a machine that sort of just like takes you through a tunnel, I don't think it's going to spit you out in the middle of nowhere or in the middle of a preschool and crush a bunch of kids. It's
right. So you have to have a time machine that has AI that knows where to land you.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, okay. So if it's not a moving device, what about? I think that's one of the hardest things to solve for time travel. To be like,
Mhm.
okay, I have to make sure that I'm in a field, but if you go to the future, like you've got to have some sort of Iron Man suit or something protected.
Sure.
Otherwise, like, or let's say because if you all of a sudden, what's the word I'm looking for? If you just appear
Yeah.
in the middle of a church and the church has been destroyed, and you just appear in the middle of a cement block, like I think that's over.
Yeah.
So have you thought of any other ways to go back in time to solve for that, like, space-time problem?
Well, I've thought about this, which somewhat relates, and it's that we just have to, as a society, collectively get comfortable with the idea of somebody from the future just appearing in front of us. Like, because that would freak us out. You know what I mean? Like, we would immediately, if, let's say, a time traveler from the future just happens to look a little bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Right.
you're going to get freaked out. And he might be perfectly just fine, you know what I mean? And harmless. But
Right.
anybody appearing in front of you would seem like danger. So I think we have to just get comfortable with the fact that that might happen,
Yeah.
and how we do that, I really don't know. But that is the beautiful thing about movies, where it's maybe we just need more time travel stories where the time travel isn't connected to some sort of like danger or threat, and it's just sort of like, all good.
Right.
Which is hard to it's hard to write a story without conflict. But the fact that we think that time travel is going to destroy things comes from a perception that's wrapped up with narrative conflict, because that's what stories have to
Right.
include.
I do like that topic. I think is a great one for a whole bunch of things, that the way we understand life in the world, especially if you're a person like me, and it sounds like yourself as well, that reads, you watch movies, you watch TV shows. I think our brain starts to understand life a little bit differently, in which if things are going well, there is going to be conflict. There is going to be something always to overcome. So
Right.
that's a really good point. And I was just thinking now about the space-time problem. I wonder if you
It's so great we're working on this, right?
yeah. Get out your graph paper. Let's sort this out.
Yeah.
That I think maybe if you went into a lake and then time traveled there, but you couldn't go. You could definitely go into the past, because you could do
Right.
it at night. Let's say in Lake Ontario, because no one's in there because it's gross. So
Okay.
like you could go maybe like 20 meters in, 2 o'clock in the morning, no one's going to see you, and then you could just come in like you're a moron
sure.
going for a swim.
Yeah.
However, if you go too far in the future and that lake is dry, and you can't know the word, but and you appear where you were floating, you might just sink to the bottom of the lake, and then you fall in like 100 feet and you're dead.
Right.
So I'm still working on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. I did think that, even though I have a first edition of a book that's mostly blank, I've thought about maybe I should even try to build an actual machine. And it's just sort of like two things that are, I don't know, it's like an old computer hooked up to a toaster. And it's like, all right, well, that's my first draft. But at least I tried. You know what I mean? Like, of course, the first attempt has to not work.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think why not try? Or even there are actually so many fun things like this. That space-time problem is definitely at least a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
In there for people thinking about that, because I think even from Bill and Ted, I was like, because a couple times they showed up and they were in the middle of the war. I'm like, well, I don't know, is that where the phone book should have put these guys? Like, I feel like there's a better spot for that phone book, for that phone booth.
Right.
Yeah. Have you watched the new Loki series?
I have. I did. It was. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I also watched. Most episodes stoned. So the great thing about watching things stoned is that I think it blows your mind even a little harder sometimes. So the final episode I thought was pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was. I thought so too. There are people that are angry about his arc and all that stuff, and I was like, okay, there are some gripes, but because I think I'm of two minds. I'm of the person that will enjoy a movie while I'm watching it, and then after the movie, I'll think about it for 3 seconds, and I'll be like, wow, that actually sucked. Like Batman vs Superman, for example.
Oh sure, yeah.
But even with Loki, I don't know. I did think it was really poetic the way that they ended that, and I've been thinking a lot about. Like, I think that's the big question about time travel. Like going back to your concept about the multiverse. Like, if there's only one timeline, well, then the restrictions for what would happen if we were to bounce to the past or the future are much different than if we can create, Back to the Future 2 different timelines.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if there's less chance of us fucking with this. With what do they call it? With the sacred timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One thing that I really liked about the last episode, because I really thought about it as well, and it's that again, I'm going to get very optimistic and positive thinking about this, but from Avengers Endgame or Infinity War, we saw Loki get choked out by Thanos, but he died a hero on some small level. On that timeline, he died a hero and kind of redeemed himself. Now, in this new timeline that we got to see, when he met Owen Wilson's character, and he eventually, this is a spoiler, but, became the new time god, I guess.
Right.
I feel like that came about because he was treated better by the people around him. In the Avengers movies, he was seen as a threat and treated as such. But
Right.
Owen Wilson's character, even though there were sort of adversaries, he really treated him with respect and they got along. And notice what happened to a person who was treated a little slightly better than he had been. He doesn't just die a hero trying to stand up to Thanos. He becomes the new time god and saves everything. So it's like
Right.
that came about because of a slightly better environment that he was in,
I
which
can
is
I can definitely get on board with that.
right, right.
I think a lot of people kind of live out that truth,
Hmm.
whereas like I've met people that, let's say, were involved in drugs and alcohol when they were younger, really badly, and let's say they're living in like Ohio or New Mexico, one of these
Sure.
states where there's not a lot to do and there's a lot of like opiates and drugs and things involved, and then they just leave that environment. Like
Right.
they move overseas, or they move to a state where it's more of a healthy environment and there are better people and they're, like you said, they're treated better. And all of a sudden this drug problem goes away. Like, there's not a lot of need for AA anymore. There's just like, I'm going to go hiking and, work in a store with people I like.
Right. And
It's sad how
it
easy that happens.
yeah, and it might sound like we're being a little too like we're making it sound a little too easy, but
Right.
um but it also does get easier, so it's like
Yeah.
it is hard to think about things getting better when you're in such a bad place, but that's why I really think progress really does sometimes take so much time, because if too much good happens at once, we do doubt it or resist it or revolt against it,
Hmm.
uh, because we're not used to good things happening. Anyway, yeah, Loki season 2. I thought it was great.
Yeah. Well, and I think that sacred timeline is the one thing that I think about now when I watch different time travel movies. That I'm like, okay, so would this world exist in a sacred timeline or
Oh,
not?
sure.
And most of them, they can branch. Like, do you have like a top whatever of time travel movies?
Back to the Future is really great. Um, I should have a list. I don't. I also do like Terminator, which is sort of like the worst case scenario, but
Right.
it's a good watch. It's still fun. Terminator
Yeah.
2 is good.
Yeah.
In some ways, I think Back to the Future or Bill and Ted's might be the most fun because it's
Great ending.
yeah, and the conflict is really not. It's just they want to get a good grade on a paper, like
Yeah.
or they have to graduate.
And did you see
Uh,
the third one yet?
I did. I saw it once. It was good.
It was better than I thought. I would have watched it if people told me it was dog shit, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was totally watchable.
It might be better than the second one.
Yeah,
It might
you're
be.
probably right.
Eh,
I was a little put off when George Carlin's daughter, I think it was. I'm not big on that actress, and I was like, oh man. But I really came around to by the end of that movie.
oh yeah. This is kind of a controversial stance, but I think that the latest Indiana Jones film,
Yeah,
which has some time travel
yeah.
stuff in it, I think it's worse than the Crystal Skull one,
Oh wow,
which
yeah.
people
This might be
which people hate.
where we part ways.
Sure.
Because the Crystal Skull
Yeah.
was just egregious from start to finish.
Well, I saw it in the theater and I remember walking out of there disappointed, but I rewatched it 2 or 3 years ago when I was home visiting my family in Ohio,
Yeah,
by the way. And
yeah.
um,
Apologies.
no, it's all good. But it was better than I thought. My memory of it was so bad that when I revisited it, it was better than I remembered it, save
Right,
for like one or two moments that were like, oh, that's horrible.
like the
But I
refrigerator.
think the refrigerator, yeah, and then there was like a scene with like monkeys,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, one of them had the same hairstyle as what's that actor's name? Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I might be able to solve the refrigerator problem for you because I
Sure,
also
okay,
saw it in theaters with a good buddy of mine,
yeah,
and we were watching that scene, and he gets blown. You know, for people who haven't seen it, Indiana Jones is, I don't know, and I think it's some like long, I don't know, it's like a Area 51 sort of environment, and he
Right.
gets blown. He's inside of a refrigerator, and he gets blown like 50 miles or 100 miles in the air, and then
Sure.
lands, and then gets out of the fridge without a
Because of
scratch.
because of an actual nuclear blast. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's even worse than I remembered. Yeah. So
Right.
then he gets out, no problem, and I audibly in the theater went, "You got to be fucking kidding me!" And then my
Right.
friend leans over and he just says, "Remember, he drank from the cup of life. He's fine."
Oh,
and I'm like,
wow.
"Okay, I'm
All right.
I'm back in." It was probably the best save that could have happened at that time.
I get it. Well, the monkey haircut doesn't really get a save in my book. But here's why I think it does have an edge over the most recent one. The
Right.
most recent one should have had a short round cameo. It had a perfect opportunity to have a short round cameo because there was a moment when Indiana Jones, I think they're in Spain or something like that, and he was like, I know a guy.
Yeah.
And the guy he knew, I think, was like Antonio Banderas or something like that.
Right.
Like, why couldn't it have been short round? Just who worked at an embassy in Greece or Spain or wherever they were. It could have been short round. So that would have saved it. And for me, and then also really the whole movie, Indiana Jones is just running the whole time. There's no, at least in the other films, there's sort of like, it feels like at least there's like side quests in the films. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't. I'd say the first 20 minutes of that film felt like a real Indiana Jones movie.
Sure.
Like the CGI or AI, whatever they were using,
it did look good.
The
first. Yeah.
I didn't know that we were that advanced yet. Like my friends
Sure.
and I were like, "Holy shit!" Like I'm buying all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that the girl that was like, you know, the Indiana Jones Jr. that like she wasn't a good guy. She wasn't someone trying to be like him.
Sure.
I really like that angle, and even at the end that like he wanted to stay in the past because that's he loved history so much he wanted to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. I love that. I probably could have cried in that in that scene. So what part of it like did you find so unwatchable that it was worse than Crystal Skull for you?
Well, okay. I also think part of it was that the character in 1960s Earth, he seemed like grumpier than he should have been. And I know that that's kind of Harrison Ford's shtick, and it was always kind of Indiana Jones's thing. But I don't know, dude, you were an archaeologist who did drink from the cup of life, who did see the Ark of the Covenant, who survived nearly getting your heart pulled out of your chest. Like,
right.
Wouldn't have that given you a little bit of like, hey, life's pretty great. Like, I'm still here. I survived. I think he could have had a little bit better.
Is his disposition. That is amazing. And I definitely will take that note. That's a good one. I think what if I had to really pick one thing in that movie that did bother me, it was that they could have put more time into the quests, the locks, the ways, the path in which to find what they were looking for.
Right.
Like that's why I think National Treasure 1 and 2 are so good, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was amazing. And I think they kind of phoned this one in, but. We're okay. We're getting a little bit off topic here because Indiana Jones is a big one for me. Yeah. Because
and no disrespect to Harrison Ford. I hope he doesn't. But
he does watch. He sent me a couple of emails. Yeah. Because I'm trying to think of other movies that do it well. Time Cop I really loved, as I mentioned. There's a romantic comedy called About Time that is really great. If you
sounds familiar.
Yeah. Like maybe I don't know how. Don't do it if you're in a bad mood because it'll just wreck your day. Because there's so much goodness in that film, and the relationship with the son and his parents and everything, even near the end. It's so sweet and loving that like you'll just end up crying through half of it. Yes, but what else is out there?
Well, I think earlier you asked about what my vision of time travel to the future would be, and I don't know if I got to it, but here is one
Sure.
thought. And it's that I think in some ways we would just not like the future
Hmm.
because we would be seen as so primitive. And because look, we do live in a flawed world. They probably would see our backward. We all seem like Ohioans to the future, I bet. How about that? I think that's a good, elegant way to put it. We all probably come across as like somebody who came from the middle of nowhere, who, has a backward perspective on things. We wouldn't fit in. That's really, I think, part of it.
Well, I would say that is quite an optimistic way to even look at the future, because I think other people would argue, and I'm not taking a horse in this race, that
Sure.
that we're potentially heading towards a place where people are completely consumed with watching others dance on TikTok or
Right.
YouTube or whatever, and that eventually we're gonna just slide back into like totalitarian control or fascism, etc. And this is like we had 150 years of a pretty good run.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so we show up and they look at us, you're like, wait a minute, we don't allow beards here. What do you
No,
what do you what are you doing here?
right. Yeah. It's possible. Hey, I'll go back to my present, I point taken.
Yeah. No, but I like that. I like thinking that if I go in the future, I'm going to learn something. They're going to have something really cool for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have implants where we can live to 200 and be super healthy, and that we can achieve the things we want to every day, instead of just like, well, I just got really burnt out around 2 o'clock, and I kind of I watched Rick and Morty till 7 and went to sleep. I don't know what happened.
Right.
like I want all these things to be flawed about our brains and about our lives, because like I can't fantasize that things are going to be awful in the future. What's the point?
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think from one of the main things I think I've taken from this chat and how you've approached this, I think is the only way we can.
Yeah, which in some ways may sound a little fascist.
Why is that?
Forcing people to be optimistic, forcing people to think, what real life is, we're all arguing about who's brainwashed about what, is really what I think describes the present.
Right.
And to tell somebody to think optimistically about tomorrow and even the next day, it does sometimes feel like thought control.
Yeah, and I guess to that person's point, I would say, yeah, because if we think that automatically the future is going to be better, then we
Sure.
don't do anything about today. And I think that probably is the biggest detriment to, like, thinking the secret, and that we can manifest a good world that doesn't run on fossil fuels and all these things. But if enough of us are scared enough that the next 10 years will bring many a demise, then
Yeah.
maybe we'll all be like, you know what? Okay, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to buy an extra thing on Amazon. I'm going to try to do these things. And so, yeah, I kind of straddle where I want to be in that. Because like otherwise you're terrified and just taking action. But
Sure.
if you think tomorrow is going to be okay, I don't know. I don't know what's better.
Yeah. It's you're right. I'm only just trying to think that tomorrow's better and sort of make today good as well. You brought up TikTok recently, and I found a lot of people on TikTok who claim to be travelers from the future, who warn about some huge crazy event, like a typhoon is going to hit on such and such day,
Amazing.
And it's easy for me to think of that as like just bullshit. But maybe the more fun and optimistic way to think about it is that they did travel from the future to warn us about something. And just the sheer fact that they talked about it on TikTok was enough of a warning that prevented it. Like, there we go. hey, it didn't happen. Okay, well the warning worked, you know?
Whatever strain of weed you are smoking,
Hmm.
I think should be synthesized for the rest of us, because you
It's
really will default that like there are people even from the future that are helping, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because I went to a place where I was thinking like, fuck, if I went back to 1995,
yeah.
like how would I even prove to anybody that I was from the future unless I had my iPhone with me that
Hmm.
wouldn't even do anything because there's no service yet.
You're right. Yeah, yeah. That's true.
Right? Like, do you have any idea? Like, it would take years, because
Mm,
you'd have to say like, okay, there's going to be this thing that's going to be invented, that company's going to take off, and but then like, who the fuck's listening to you? Like, you'd be committed well before that.
right, right. Yeah, I think somebody would have to come back and tell you immediately this is about to happen in like 10 seconds. And it's,
Right.
something, and then they'd have to repeat that.
All the
It's,
time.
yeah, yeah. It's,
Like,
I don't know.
you need a computer with you to say, okay, I've just met Janice in the street, and I need to convince
Yeah, yeah.
Janice that I'm from the future. Okay, Janice will get a yeast infection in 3 days. Just
Sure, sure.
let her know, and you'll prove it.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to do that. Well, that's great. All right. Well,
See,
then I,
I mean, we didn't solve it, the time travel conundrum, but we did get closer. And
yeah,
there's value in that.
incremental wins is all we can really ask for.
That's right.
So I guess I want to be respectful of your time.
Sure.
Where do you want to take the time travel blueprints book project from here?
Well, I am working on a second edition, which, as I said, it has less empty pages and it has more information in the back.
Yeah.
Um, I'm I like to fuck around with AI and ChatGPT a little bit, and ChatGPT and I are currently working on an equation for time travel, and of course, it isn't accurate, but it doesn't matter,
Amazing.
you know. Um,
Yeah.
I also do a live show called Time Machine Blueprints where I sometimes tell jokes, but then I do end in a way where I think that I convince the audience that time travel will become real. Um, so I do a little bit
That's
of
great.
that, and then I try to be funny where I can, on stage or not. So I'm around. I'm out there.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, if you
Yeah,
do ever, time travel, like Marty said, like look me up.
yeah. Oh, definitely.
All right. Well,
And you as
yeah.
well.
Well, absolutely, I will.
Yeah,
Like, I think New York will. I don't know. Maybe. Well, hold on. I'm going to choose the optimistic point. So New
okay.
York will be like a plant covered oasis at that point.
Yeah.
No noise from the cars anymore, and people will be super chill.
Well, there are more green roofs than there used to be. People are, planting gardens on their roof, and I think they just are about to enact some sort of congestion tax in Midtown, so there will hypothetically soon be less traffic
All
on
right.
certain
Well,
days. So, I mean,
maybe I just made that happen. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
All right. Sean, thank you so much for being here. This is super fun. I really enjoyed it, and all the best with your stand up and the second edition of your book.
Thank you, Michael. Happy to be here.
So thanks for listening to No More, No Less. I appreciate the time you spent with me today. So please subscribe and rate the show if you enjoyed it. It'll help me create more amazing content and get that next little bit of validation that I so deeply crave. If you did enjoy it, well, that sucks. But to make sure, I think you should listen to my next 10 episodes and then decide. I mean, come on. Rome was not built in a day. I'm just getting warmed up here, guys. So thanks again. See you next time.